How we doing, folks? My guest today is going to be Emerson Smith. Emerson is a former Olympian and former member of the U.S. freestyle ski team as a skier. After his ski career, Emerson turned to coaching, where he was the coach for the Park City ski and snowboard team. He also had a brief time coaching for the U.S. freestyle ski team, and he currently is the head coach for Wasatch Freestyle. And in this episode, we go through and discuss Emerson's journey through skiing, his career. We talk about some of the lows, and of course, we talk about the highs and successes. It was really great to be able to have this conversation with Emerson. He's a good friend. We had a lot of fun, and I really hope you folks enjoy this episode. Thanks.
E-Dog, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Bob, thanks for having me, man. I stoked to get asked to be on in the arena.
Yeah, no, it's funny to think because a lot of the times when we do like our mogul podcasts and talking about the World Cup or everything else, you really like to try and take a little bit of like a back seat and listen in for some of that wisdom from like a Kober or Aldegary or whoever else we have on, and try to learn and glean as much as possible. So I think it'll be really fun to kind of learn and get the history kind of your career and how you've kind of come up, and I think it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. That's it's a good point, right? Like going on those preseason World Cups or the postseason, like you said, you got a Kober or an Aldegary on there. Like, I take that as a pretty big learning moment where like I'd prefer to just listen to them and
Right.
walk away from that with as much information as possible, as
Yeah.
opposed to really me throwing in my 2 cents. Um, so no, I'm excited to chat some sport with you.
It's all about you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm really excited too because I mean we're really good friends, but there's a lot of like your start in your history that I really don't know like that well. I knew that came up from like Killington. I'm pretty sure like the first time I remember seeing your name like on a start list or something, I think it was like Squaw Nationals like a long time ago, and I was like, "Who's this Emerson Smith kid?" I think you were like eighth or I want to say in duels or something at Squaw somewhere in there.
Stratton actually.
Was it Stratton? Okay,
Stratton was
Stratton.
my first
Okay,
one in
2012.
2012, the second year they
Okay,
had it.
yep.
The year
When the
they
course
had
had like totally fucking melted away.
totally melted,
Yeah,
dry ice in the back,
yeah.
like that year. Yep, that was my first nationals, first big one. Dueled good old Landon Gardner.
Landon Gardner.
Yep,
Wow.
yep, throwback there,
Mm-hmm.
and what an eye opener that one was to me. Like,
Yeah.
that was back in the day too, where the higher seed got to pick their lane,
Right.
and yeah, I think I qualified. What they did, maybe 20 into the final. I qualified like 18th or whatever. Won one duel. Kid ate it. I think he like lacerated a kid named Bruce Perry Jr. Yep, yep. And then get up top up against Landon. He's been skiing one line all week,
Mm-hmm.
all week. Veteran me. I'm 14, and he comes up and he's like, "Hey, buddy, what line do you want to ski?" And I'm sitting there thinking like, "Oh, well, this guy's about to F me up." And then I was like, "Well, I've been in that line all day, but like, so have you." And he goes, "No, that's great. You take it." And then he went and worked me. Yeah, went in the other line. I hadn't seen him ski it all week and just worked me. But class act out of him.
Yeah.
He gave
Yeah.
me
Of
my
course.
line.
Yep.
But yeah, that was my first big FIS event. Um, went to KMS for 2 years before making the move out to Colorado. But even further back than that, like I grew up skiing at Mount Snow in
Yeah.
Vermont and skied on the weekend program there for years.
Okay.
Years. That's where I started to fall in love with mogul skiing.
And how did you fall in love with like what was the kind of some of those inspirational or turning point moments in your life to make you follow the path that now has
Yeah,
brought you here?
honestly, like I'd love to say it was the actual active skiing moguls.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I loved that, but a lot of it was like I think I did my first event when I was 6 or 7 years old at Waterville Valley, East Coast B skiing. Um, and it was that aspect like there had to be 40 of us little kids.
Yeah.
Parents would travel every weekend. We'd all stay in a hotel. Like that team environment and stuff. Like I was one of the few kids that grew up in the actual town. Everyone else came in on weekends from New York, Connecticut, Mass, all that. And like,
Right.
that's when I saw all my friends. I'd go back to school through the week and like, I didn't have many like school friends.
Right.
So on weekends, right, that's when my life like
Really came
blossomed,
a lot. Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
cool.
that's when
Right.
I was like, holy crap, this is what I live for. And it started like my dad loved mogul skiing, you know, we'd just go free bump it. And then my brother was like, well, I want to join this program. He joins it the first year I don't. And halfway through the season, you know, it ends up my dad and I are following this team around all weekend anyways.
Okay.
And the coaches and stuff, they're all great guys. They let me like tag along, you know, some
Mhm.
little kid. And next year I joined it, and then, you know, you do all the events, the big air, the
Right. You're doing all the
slope,
disciplines that they have. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
honestly, like I actually would do better in slope style.
Mhm.
Like that's what we practice more there. Like we had a great park and everything, but God, I was terrified of it. Just absolutely terrified of it. Like jumps started getting bigger, tricks bigger, and that's back in the day. Like you didn't qualify stuff in terms. Like you'd go to a big air event and the starter would be like, "What trick are you doing?" And you'd be like, "I'm gonna do a Misty 7." And they'd look at your coach, and if your coach gave the nod, it was like you were good to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there like 10 years old doing these tricks off big jumps, just terrified.
Right.
And mogul skiing, I like loved the aspect of like it's still scary, but there was like a lot more strategy
Mhm.
as opposed to just like I'm gonna go huck myself off this jump and in the air probably close my eyes, you know, and
See
like
how this
hope I
goes.
land, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of gravitated towards the moguls, and it was nice. Like my brother started going towards park,
Mhm.
which was great that we picked different disciplines because God, we'd fight like cats and dogs, you know. So it was
Yeah.
like that was a great aspect that we like branched off, you know.
Mhm.
Like I think the last mogul event we did, he actually beat me, and like still to date never lets me live it down. So it's really good that we didn't spend, you know, our whole athletic career competing. But yeah, I kind of got hooked on that like team environment and like the aspect of being a part of something,
Mhm.
right? It like really like you feel valued in that. Like you have
Yeah.
a purpose, you know?
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's what hooked me.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
then so it's interesting about the brothers, you know, like getting in because a lot of the other people I've had on before, you know, like that is part of like the push and the drive
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of trying to get to that new level. Like having Mick on, you know, his one of his biggest inspirations was his brother.
Yeah.
Just in the fact of like pushing him every day. He's trying to chase like
Yeah.
those older siblings, and you look at a lot of the sports. I mean, especially it's most sports, but you look at mogul skiing as well. Is definitely it doesn't have a shortage of that, right?
No, a lot of
Wilson
siblings.
brothers, Disco brothers,
Oh, yeah.
Mosley brothers. Like there's always, you know, the younger ones trying to chase and
Yeah.
keep up with the rest of the crew. So it's pretty, you know,
Yeah, it's unique,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people think like that's a huge part of the fun where like
It would have ruined it for you.
yeah, him and I would have been a lot different of a career, I think, for both of us, you
Yeah.
know? Like there could have been some really good, but like it was nice to both be able to go and do something where like one success had no impact on the other,
Right.
you know?
Mhm.
And it was able to have this moment of like everything he did, I was able to be really proud of. Everything I did, you know, he was able to be really proud of without any like inner competition,
Right.
which was, I think, a really healthy experience for us, right? Like I
Yeah.
remember being young and, you know, the first time I ever beat him was at Whaleback at a little kid mogul event.
Yeah.
And oh God, I think he had won a ton of events that year and I finally won one.
Mm-hmm.
And right, like, woo, long car ride back to Dover, Vermont, right?
Yeah.
Just sitting in the back seat, like I'm looking at my medal, you know, it's like the coolest thing I've ever done. And he's sitting there just side eyeing me, like, you know. Then next week he went and smoked me in the event, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Same thing, right? Then we both had a taste of winning, and it's like this whole like I want to beat him thing, which is good. It can be healthy, but I think it was better that we went separate directions.
Gotcha.
So he was a little bit more of the adrenaline junkie too, you know. He loved the big jumps, the risk and everything, and I'm sitting there like, you know, I liked turns. I liked skiing, you know. The jumps were like I was trying to get back on the ground as quick as I could to get back to doing what I
Absolutely.
liked.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. My goal was to always be the best skier.
yeah.
It was never like the jumping and all that aspect. I was like, oh, I want to be the best mogul skier. This whole
Yeah.
other aspect. And then it just kept, the way our sport progressed so much when I first started getting into it, it was like, oh, you can do a 360? That's like a big move.
Huge.
And like, learning a backflip at like 16.
Yeah.
15, I was like a little bit. And then just to see now, right? We just finished up ramps
crazy.
the other day and like, you got...
It's crazy, right?
12-year-olds hit the double and like going like,
I tell all these kids to go do doubles, scare themselves a little, and they're like, well, you gonna come ramp with us? You want to do some doubles? And I roll my feet go over my head once.
Yeah.
That's it. I have no interest in the doubles. I've landed on the face on the ramps a few times trying them. That's enough for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what brought on the move to Killington? Was that just kind of back there, one of like the main pillar programs, and you wanted to pursue it, and like dad think this is the way to go? Did the coaches kind of steer you there, or how'd that kind of come about?
Really interesting, actually. Like, they were the pillar program of the East Coast, right? Like Zemba, Keating, Sterling, a lot of like big dogs on the East Coast all went to KMS, and they were good at recruiting everything, and it just so happened like my brother was in Park, I was in Moguls, and a big thing was like my parents didn't want to split us up. You know, like I was 12 years old looking at going to KMS, living in the dorms, right? Like my parents weren't going to send me alone, and KMS actually started a free ride team, like a slopestyle team.
Okay.
Which is funny. Like one of the big reasons I wanted to go to Killington was DJ Montgomery was there, who like I thought was a great coach.
At Killington, as we go back a little bit, we had a little technical difficulties, but so you're at Killington, and they have the free ride coach, DJ, that they bring in. You spend some time there and ski, 2 years there?
2 seasons at KMS.
2 seasons at KMS, and then you're kind of contemplating whether to go to Aspen with your dad to get a little bit of just kind of fun skiing a couple weeks out there, right?
Yep.
He was kind of going out for a trip, or you could stay home and like almost guarantee your spot to juniors because you were kind of a little bit on the border there.
Yeah, I was on the cusp, right? So I could have stayed home and done another contest, or gone and had fun and maybe not made juniors, which, right, like we all did goal sheets every season. Like juniors, that was my big goal.
Right.
And I chose to go to Aspen. Went and free skied, had a great time, and on the way home ended up stopping in Breckenridge and checking out that town.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad being like, "This is a really cool place. Like, I think your mom could live here." And my brother and I were 13 and 14, and we're like, "Yeah, totally we all love it."
Sweet, yeah.
Right. So, end up going home. It all worked out. I made juniors. Went to juniors. Remember, I got an age group podium there, which was like super cool.
Yeah.
I think whatever. I probably got like 40.
And that was your first juniors?
First juniors.
Nice.
Yep. Probably got like 40 something overall, but I remember being on the podium there, and then go home. Switch gears, get into the springtime, and remember like having some good long talks with my dad about like, is skiing something I wanted to keep doing competitively, right? Like, did I want to go have a normal high school experience, play soccer, lacrosse, maybe hockey, something, or did I want to like really dive into this whole skiing thing?
Yeah.
And then one rogue day, I get a random call from this guy, Scott Rawls. He's like, "Hey, I'm Scott Rawls. I'm the head coach of the U.S. ski team." And he invited me to this Young Guns camp. Knew nothing about, really honestly didn't get that much information besides that it was like a U.S. ski team sanctioned camp for like next up and coming mogul skiers. And I remember my parents were like, "That's awesome." And he was like, "All you have to do is get a flight to Utah on these days and a flight home." Okay, great. So I end up going there, and I go to this camp, and I remember like I was supposed to stay with Rawlsy. And he picks me up from the airport. I don't know this guy, anything. Like, we drive up to Park City. I've never been to Utah or anything, and we go to the grocery store. And we're walking around, and it's Scott and I just vibing, and we run into this whole group of people. And it's Hunter Bailey, his dad, and like 6 kids, all from Colorado.
Okay.
And all the people from Colorado, they knew each other, everything, right? So they all were staying together in one big house. You know, they all got together, planned it.
Yep.
I'm the one Eastern kid. And yeah, Hunter's dad was just like great. And he was like, where are you saying all this stuff? And he ended up talking to Scott for like 10 minutes. And then he was like, okay, Emerson, like, grab your stuff. You're going to stay with us.
Oh, that's cool.
So I go move into this house with like all these Colorado kids that know
Yeah.
each other and stuff. And back then that camp, like, it was like 14 days.
Right.
Tons of training, water ramping, on snow, like all this stuff. And I get to go like stay in this house with all these kids my age who are like all sick at skiing and
Yep.
stuff, which was like, it was awesome, right? Like some of those guys became like my lifelong friends.
Yeah.
But that's when I first really met them,
Mhm.
right? I had seen them at this junior nationals or gone and watched nationals. And, you know, like back then you heard the name Bruce Perry Jr.
Right.
and you're like, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
Like he was on that classic Waterville Junior Nationals video of like the next gen of bump skiers or whatever.
Right. Yeah. No.
And
no,
it was
exactly
like,
what you're talking
it was
about.
crazy. Like he was like famous to me.
Yeah.
And so I go stay with them. And then at this point I'm like all in.
Yeah.
Mogul skiing.
Like,
That's
this is what I want to
that's
do.
all I want to do. This is like the
Yeah.
most fun 14 days of my life.
Yeah.
And it turns out while I was there, my parents never said a word. They flew out to Colorado, went up to Breckenridge,
And just rented a place.
rented a place. We were moving there starting August 1st. My brother's stoked. Breck has like the sickest park in the world.
Did you have any idea they were going to do it like before the trip? Like, and
Not
they're like,
really.
No, we've kind of decided like
Yeah.
we want to make this move.
Yeah, it's like I'm in
really cool.
Utah at this camp, and I think I'm talking to him every night, right? And I
Yeah.
just like I can't shut up about how awesome this is.
Right.
And they just
So
like
they can hear it in your voice. and
next
they're
thing
like,
you
"All
know,
right."
they fly to Colorado, 3-day trip. They rent a place. We're moving there. And what's crazy too is like I didn't even know where I was going to ski there.
Yeah.
We didn't have a club. We didn't know anything, right? You come from the East Coast, you ski on these weekend clubs. You go to the one big academy.
Right.
You go to CVA. You go to Gould. You go to KMS. You go to Stratton.
Mhm.
Well, out west, it's a lot different, right?
Yeah. No,
Way
different
different.
setup.
So we end up moving out west August 1st, do the road trip, everything, and still no idea. No idea what team, who the coaches are, anything. And I go to Steamboat for a day. You can sign up, just whatever, ramp with whoever the guy running the show there is that day.
Okay.
And yeah, we had asked a bunch of people about like Team Summit or Team Breck, and like, you know, no one had anything bad to say about Chris Carson. Everyone was just like,
Yeah.
nicest guy ever, all this stuff, you know. You get mixed reports about this Dowling character and stuff, and I go there, and it just so happens Dowling's there with like a
Some
few
of his
Team
kids.
Breck athletes,
Okay.
like
At the Steamboat Water.
at the Steamboat water ramp. And without any asking anything, like all he got out of me was that we just moved to Breckenridge. And all throughout the day, he just started coaching me. And right, like coming from Killington and all this stuff, there's all these talks about like goals. Like, okay, like you want to go to the Olympics, say it. Like
Right.
you can do it, you know? Like
Yeah.
you're in that pipeline. And like, I remember Dowling coached me, and he was just like kind of hard on me.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he kind of looked at me. He was like, yeah, you have some talent. A lot of work. And I'm sitting there, and we get in the car, and like, I think it's my dad and I were both like, I like that guy.
Yeah.
He shot it straight. Like,
Right.
you know, like he didn't blow any smoke up the ass or anything. And he
Right.
just like shot it straight and was like, maybe one of the first like coaches at that time in my career to be like, you get a lot of work to do, kid.
Right.
But right, his exact point was like, I'll get you there. Like,
Yeah.
I'll
I
help
can
you.
do it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And we left that day, never ended up talking to Chris Carson or Team Summit. Just like from that
Really?
day forward, I joined Team Breck. I skied with Dowling, and
Interesting.
that was the thing. And like, so I end up joining this team, and you know, there's guys like Dylan Walzak, Alex de Bonville. Really small club, right? And I knew nothing about them.
Right.
I started a new high school, joined this little team, and these guys have known each other for years and all this stuff, and started skiing with them. And Downland's talking basically parcel tongue to me. It's a language I don't even understand.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And throughout that season, like, I probably got a little worse. And then I remember, like, one day training right before, like, divisional champs, you know, Dylan took me for a lap and, like, broke it down turn by turn and, like, translated everything Downland would say. And that's when it, like, all clicked for me. That's when, like, everything was, like, I was like, oh, God, like,
this is how you ski.
This is how you do it.
Yeah.
Ended up going to juniors that year, and, like, yeah, Dylan was there, Bruce, Michael the Grandest, like, a lot of big dogs. And I ended up getting 4th overall.
Okay.
Went from, like, 40-something to 4th.
And where was that? Where was that at? What
that was at Steamboat.
It was at the boat. Okay.
It was at the boat. Nala. Yeah, good.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
And that was, like, another huge moment in my career that, like, kept me going, right?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
kept me wanting it, loving it. And that's when Downland made the move to Vail that spring.
Okay.
And that was, like, another huge moment. Like, you know, we're sitting there, we just moved across the country to Breckenridge. Like,
Right.
I don't even have a license.
And so he was still at Breck. He
Yep.
was still doing that thing because he was at Summit, and then
Yep.
he had let, and then okay, so he was.
So
he
my
was still
first
Breck.
year out west was on Team Rec.
Okay.
Last year, their mogul team
Gotcha.
happened. Springtime comes, Downland's moving to Vail, all this stuff. I don't have a license. We're all like, how am I even going to get to Vail every day? And that was where, like, Dylan and Alex Bonville were like, we'll take them. Like,
Okay.
we got
That's
'em,
pretty cool.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
like Dylan took me under his wing and, like, yeah, he got me to training every day. Like, made it happen. Like, he was a huge mentor and influence in my career in that time of, like, not only stuff on hill, but, like, he also helped facilitate me even getting there.
Right.
Which was, like, massive, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then, yeah, joined Team Vail and was there for 5 years with Dowling and Riley. And
Yeah.
stayed there, kept roots there throughout most of my career. And that kind of shaped it all the way till the national team and
Yeah.
throughout my career on the national team.
Right.
Was with those guys.
Now, so that kind of serendipitous meeting, right, with Dowling and with John at the boat. I mean, how much do you, like, look back on that and, like, well, you know, what if he had never shown up? I mean, do you ever kind of contemplate that? Because it's an interesting, and how much, like, I think it's interesting as well that he just also gave you he's the one that wasn't like, oh, it's all great, it's all good. Like,
Yeah.
his talent's there, but
Yeah.
you got a lot of fucking work to do.
Yeah. No, I think about that day a lot, right? Like, to be totally honest, based on the reviews we got of, like, Team Summit and Team Breck and Chris Carson and Dowling from a lot of different people, like, yeah, had I not met him that day, I probably would have went on Team Summit. And who knows, right? Like, some people say it's the athlete, some people say it's the coach, some people say it's a combo. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm a strong believer that, like, if that wasn't the path I chose, like, had I stayed east or had I gone elsewhere or something, like, I don't know if my career would have been the same.
Right.
Might have been better. Might have been worse. But, like, how it ended up, I'm pretty happy with. So I'm certainly glad he was there that day. And, like, yeah, I look back on it too. Like, even the interaction with him, like, we could have gotten in the car after and been like, well, screw that dude.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know, like,
right.
The whole interaction in that whole day, like, yeah, that shaped a lot of the path I went on and a lot of the decisions that were made after that. Yeah. Which is, it's cool. Yeah. It is crazy to think, like, yeah, had he not shown up that day, like, could have had a whole different career. Yeah. Which is wild.
And so one of the things that you also touched on was Riley.
Oh, yeah.
He started, so had he started coaching at Vail yet? Or because he was still kind of competing then?
Yeah.
And then around, what, 2011, 2012? Or had he already retired by then?
So he was retired.
Okay.
That first year on Team Breck, Riley was going to CU Boulder.
Okay.
and would come do a couple things coaching here and there with Dowling, but wasn't like a full-time guy.
Okay.
And then by the time we got to junior nationals, like he was our guy. Like he was there, 14 Breck and stuff. And yeah, when Dowling made the jump to Vail, Riley, that's when Riley kind of like came in full time.
Okay.
He was with Vail. I think there was probably a better avenue there to like be a coach and actually do it in a big club like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is part of it too, right? Like Dowling was the head honcho, then Riley was his head coach, and yeah, I kind of started like Riley started full-time coaching, and that's when I went there.
Right. So, what were your first impressions of getting to meet Riley? Because I know, I mean, spoiler alert, later on in your career and like in life, super influential and inspirational and a big part of your journey, not only competitively but also like in life. So, what was some of those first like interactions as he comes into the picture with Vail?
Yeah, Riley came in and was he was probably the most influential part of my whole time at Vail. Like there was Dowling, who Dowling had the front runners, right? Like he had the Dillons, he had the at that time the Hunter Bailey, right? Okay. And Riley was, John's assistant coach and everything, and like I started really working with Riley.
Gotcha.
Which was fun because like there were still times I couldn't understand everything Dowling was saying. He'd throw words at me and stuff that I'd be like, what does that mean? Where Riley was huge in like interpreting that into like, simple terms for me and everything. And it was fun. Like he started coaching. I was still young in my developmental stages, and like I got to kind of develop with him.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to say like as a test dummy or anything, but like as he was learning how he wanted to develop as a coach, like I was an athlete that was on that journey with him.
Yeah.
So, some trial and error, some we're going to see if this works type
right.
thing. And that was really cool for me. It was, I don't think at any point I was probably Dowling's like favorite, which everyone wanted to be. You wanted to be, right?
Yeah.
But
fighting for that.
It's fighting for that pecking order with him, right? Like everyone wanted to be his top dog. That's how you got,
right?
Everyone wanted to be that little bit special,
right?
And
it's part of the reason why so many people try to go to that program, right?
Yeah,
it's produced
tons
and tons of athletes.
Yeah,
and so you want to get as much attention from him as
you
can. Yeah.
And at a certain point, I kind of looked at him and was like, well, you know what? Screw the pecking order. Like this other guy's great.
Yeah.
I like him a ton, right? He spoke a language that I understood, and he got my mindset and everything. So I just gravitated towards him, like that was the guy I wanted to work with every day. That was the guy I wanted to be in charge of my career. And that was super cool for me because, right, that was like I got to feel like special through him, like that was my guy, which was awesome. And then, as Vail grew over the years, like where Vail, the first year I was on Vail, like not that big of a team. 4 years later, one of the bigger teams in the country, right? And Riley ran it all. But that was always nice for me to know that like I had been with him a long time. I always knew I could trust him, and like he always had my best interest in mind, which was huge, right? That bond just built over years, all the way through the end of my career. Like he was there every step of it, which was awesome. Like not a lot of athletes get that. Like I had the same coach from 14 till I retired, which really cool.
Did he get hired by the ski team like the same year you had made the team, or was it like, was there a little bit, because he was pretty close, right?
Yeah.
He ended up getting hired by the ski team.
Yeah, so I made it in at the end of 15, 16. He didn't get hired till I want to say spring of 17, 18, right after the games.
Okay.
Where we were really fortunate was Dowling and Riley did a great job taking care of us in terms of like we always had a home at Vail.
Yeah.
We could always go back there. So I remember when I first made the national team, I'd move out to Utah for the summer, train with them. We'd go up to Mount Hood and stuff, but we'd stick around in Hood, stay with Vail for a few days.
Right.
Or they'd go to Zermatt and kind of mimic our camp. So we always had a Riley there or a Dowling there to just be in another layer of support for us.
Sure.
Which was huge once you get in the system of like, you're another person on the team. You're another guy, you're another girl. And we always had this external support system that was like there for us.
Yeah.
Which was great. And then going into the Olympic year in 2018, there were so many of us Vail on the ski team, like at least 6 of us, I think.
Okay.
That Dowling and Riley had chatted, and they just came up with a system that was like, you know what? We all were like, we want Riley there. Like all of us loved having his support and everything. And John made it happen, and he ended up piggybacking on team camps to say he'd plan his own camp, and then he came to all the World Cups leading up to the Olympics, and then he came to the Olympics and coached us, which was huge for us, right? Like in 2018, I mean, he was there and half the team was his Vail athletes, which
team.
was huge, right? Like that extra layer of support and stuff. And like, I mean, that was massive in our career to know we had another support system that just cared about us.
Right.
It's funny, like you look back on it and like different people's opinions on it and everything. Like, some people will be like, that was a bad decision for them. Some people are like, that was a great decision for them. But it's interesting when like you look at each of our mindset, and like mine especially is like, if I went back and did it all again with everything I know now, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Like that was such a huge moment in our career that like meant so much to all of us, right? And like a guy like Riley, it's hilarious, 6 years after he came and coached us in the Olympics, and then he went on to be a national team coach and coached us, like the guy ended up marrying my wife and I, like, that's a guy who beyond skiing was such a impact in my life just as a person that couldn't trade that for the world, And it's funny when you ask like the Dowling and the Riley thing, right? I look at my wedding and Riley's the guy there marrying me, right? And Dowling, being as great as he is and where his mindset is at and stuff, right? He's in Chile running a training camp during then, which is exactly what you'd expect, right?
Yeah.
He's on to the next generation. He's developing, and that's what makes him who he is.
Sure.
No,
absolutely.
But that's just a little piece at the two different outlooks and perspectives there.
Yeah.
Which is, it's interesting,
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So.
Well, let's. I mean, you touched a little bit on 2018. Let's talk about that a little bit and that kind of that season.
Yeah.
Right? Like going into that. I mean, you have a couple great NORAM tours and make your way to the ski team. I mean, I guess we can go back and talk about that for like what was that like? You chip away. You have Riley and Dowling there. You have that kind of dynamic in between the team, right? Which I think one of those things that's super important, and you see at least throughout history and a lot of different people that I've had on the show, is just the team environment and being able to push each other, right?
Yeah.
Want to see each other get better, and that whole dynamic really, I feel like kind of builds momentum and kind of snowballs, right?
Yeah.
I had when I had Chuck on, he was talking about how at Killington it was Donna Weinbreck and Liz and Johnny Witt and Desovich and Aldegari and those guys. Like, you got to show up to training because you're trying to keep up with those guys and push yourself and not show to the other guys that maybe you're a little tired or sore. And Vail was really rolling, especially at that time, and those different guys that you had in. So what was that like? And I'm sure it's probably helped in the coach's perspective as we get into that too, right? Being able to have that momentum and that environment.
Oh yeah. It was a high intense environment, right? There was a group of us on that team that were just, all of us wanted to win, right? That's what we all wanted to do. That's why we all were there, and it did really, really push all of us, I think.
Yeah.
which is so interesting, right? We were each other's biggest competitors, biggest rivals. Like, any two of us ever got in the dual skate, nobody wanted to lose that one.
Oh yeah,
That was
that's bragging rights.
Yeah.
That's all on the yep.
You go back and watch the videos of it, and 90% of them, when all of us were together, was one of us tumbling through the middle or one of us doing a massive spread on bottom air, because there was no governor on those duels, right? Like all strategy, everything went out the window. It was balls to the walls. I'm gonna crush you on both sides. And I think, like, looking at a Hunter Bailey, like, I think in our career we dueled maybe 6 times. We probably had 2 good duels. 2 good duels. Other than that, it was just like a wash. It's like one of us blew up, both of us blew up, and whoever crosses the line first. But we had like 2 good ones where it was like awesome, right?
Yeah.
And that was so huge to have that whole peer group like striving to try and make the national team, get on World Cup, go to the Olympics. That it was awesome, right? And then you go on NORAMs and you have these guys you train with every day who, you don't want to miss a day.
Right.
Casey's going today. Like, I was going to take it off. I'm going to go. Yeah. Right. But then you go on NORAMs and you have these rogue cats like a Troy Tully or Joel Hedrick there who are also really good.
Right.
And going to compete. And all of a sudden that shifts from like looking at your teammates as like, I want to beat these guys, to looking at each other and being like, one of us 3 has to beat these guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Which turns into a great like camaraderie.
Yeah.
A great like using each other to get the best out of the individual type, which was awesome, right? Like, if one of us won, that was a huge win. And then you look at those NORAMs and like, 2 years in a row going up against Tully, like a back-to-back champ. He's that guy. He's going to show up every day. He's going to get the job done every day. And he did, but it was definitely a different dynamic the first year up against him. Non-teamers still in the Vail system. Went neck and neck with him down to the last day, and he won, right? And then that spring, we both make the national team. Yeah. Now we're teammates and everything. Now that next year, we're on it as teammates. Right? I still have the outside support of Vail and everything, but also, like, this guy is, he's my teammate, which then interesting to see how that helps build you up as well. Like, now you're on a new team, new group of guys, and some of those Vail guys are in there and everything. And that was also just like a great learning experience of like using each other to get the best out of ourselves. And helping push. Like, you go train every day and work hard, and like, a lot of days it's funny hearing kids now when they're like, I'm sore, and like, God, I don't know if I want to do it today. And it's like, you get to a certain age, like, you're gonna have more of those days than days you wake up and are like, God, I feel good.
I feel great.
Let's go get it.
No, totally.
Which is, as long as you have a good peer group like that and stuff, and the right support system, like it is, I think it makes it pretty easy to get up and do it even on the bad days. Which is, it's kind of a testament to like a team culture, what your common goals are along with your individual goals, which is the fun part of it.
So what, like, you get named to the ski team, and what is that? I mean, that's career goal for a lot of different people. And so what was that like to was that for you just checking it off the list? Because it's always interesting, like some of the people that talk to will be like, like even some of the athletes you talk to about what their goals are. It's like, I just want to make the U.S. team. I want to make an Olympics. I want to, so it's always interesting to get that. Like, for you, was that just one of the goals on the way to, or did you not look at it that way? Were you just like, I just want to be the best that I can be?
That's interesting, right? Like, making the ski team was such a goal of mine for so long.
So it was a big goal.
Huge goal.
Yeah.
But the actual reward of making it, the emotion and everything about it was different than I always anticipated.
Okay.
So
in what aspect?
So I made the ski team when they started the development team, the D team, age base, all of that.
Well.
And yeah, I feel like in a sense, like making that national team, the feeling and the pride of making it was like starting that D team almost robbed me of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting look, right? Like
Yeah.
it went from like you earned this spot to you were given this spot.
Right.
So that's a really interesting dynamic, right? Of like you achieve like at that time a life goal, a huge stepping stone in your career, and the perception of it isn't that you earned it, but that you were given it.
Yeah.
Which kind of deters from that overall like joy and
Sure.
happiness of it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
that changes the perception of how you look at it, right? And I think how you go to training every day, right? Like
Yeah.
if the idea isn't that you earned it but you were given it, right? Like that'll influence your overall attitude towards it and everything.
Sure.
And every day you have to be there because you were given this opportunity instead of you want to be there. You earned this right, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, and I think that's probably a big piece why I did continue to lean on the Vail system and everything was,
Yeah.
those guys would look at me and be like, you earned that right,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to being given it. Which certainly I think probably changed my dynamic those first few years on the ski team.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, right? Like I'd finish every season and not know where my next season started.
Yeah.
Like at no point did I finish a season on the ski team and be like, I'm going to Ruka next year.
Yeah.
I'd wake up in the spring, see team nominations, see everything, and be like, buckle up. We got a hell of a summer coming. Like you better show up, right?
Yeah.
And that idea changes the way you train too.
Right.
There's a lot of moments on that ski team where my training I felt like was competing
Mm-hmm.
for my start as opposed to training to get better to perform my best.
Right. Yeah.
Which was a totally different mindset than I was raised on and grew up on of how you train.
Right.
So I'll say I got really good at doing top to bottoms, which probably helped me come contest time.
Sure.
Like I put numbers back in those off seasons, but that idea of all season of like how you are with your teammates, like that guy's crew, there was a couple guys on the team, yeah, they didn't have anything to worry about.
Sure.
They knew they were going to Ruka. You got the Rowleys, the Brads,
Yep.
the Murphys. They know. They know they're going to Ruka. The rest of us, it's a dogfight. Right? Like it's a toss-up. You leave Australia and you see Joel just lay down 10 heaters a day. You're like, shit, he's going to Ruka. Right? And you're like, I'm going to selections. Buckle up. And it's interesting how that team dynamic then plays into your overall mindset and everything. Because it is, right? Like I'd go home from camps. I live with a few of the guys on the team.
Sure.
I hang out with the other ones every day. We're all best friends, but you go to these camps and it's a brawl on hill, right? Like you're competing against your best friends every day for those starts, and like the day those calls are made for those starts, like a couple of you are going to get great news, a couple of you are going to get terrible news, and it's like at the end of it we are still really good friends. And like how do you have those highs when others have those incredible lows and vice versa? And it's a super interesting dynamic to deal with.
Right. Absolutely.
In that, you get those moments, and it's like you got to try and seize it, and got to try to make the best of it. Like I look at going into that 2017-18 season of the Olympic year, and right, like you have conversations with people in the springtime before the prep period, and you're like, yeah, I want to go to the Olympics.
Right.
Yep, I'm gonna go. And people look at you and like a lot of logical people are like, what a great goal, but like you don't even have starts.
Yeah.
Right? So at a certain point you're saying that with like a sense of a delusional idea kind of.
Right. Which I kind of feel like you have to with a lot of those people. Like you have to have that kind of belief though, and that conviction.
Yep. You have to have some sense of a like Dylan would always say it best, like you have to have a sense of like delusional confidence. Right? Yeah. Like a lot of the goals you set and stuff, like they're good goals if 90% of the people look at you and walk away and be like, what is that guy talking about?
No.
Like, he thinks he's going to go do that? Like,
Yeah.
right? But that's like, you have to set the bar high, and like, it's definitely, I think, a lot tougher to get there when you don't know the route.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sitting there in the spring and you're like, I'm going to go to the Olympics next year. But you're like, is that route going to Ruka? And what do I have to do? Or is that route going to selections? And then, like the Casey and Dringa approach of like, you go to selections, you got to get hot. Or do you get the shot right from Ruka? And how it all turns out. But it, it was certainly a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most stressful year of my life. I wish like I didn't have some grays on my head right now at my age, but like I got to imagine that year definitely brought some of them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up going to Ruka that year, and
did you get the start from Australia, or went like, because they used to? I mean, I was always kind of that summer camp.
Yeah.
And then off of Zermatt plenty of times
Yep.
too. You'd get the fall start, or however that would work.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know what actually was that made me get it.
Get the start in Ruka?
Yep.
Yeah.
I ended up getting a call after Switzerland, and got the call I was going to Ruka. I had Ruka and China starts. 3 starts. If I didn't do well there, I was going down a level.
Gotcha.
And
would you have been able to? So would you go down and compete at selections, or would you miss selections because of China, or how did that kind of?
I think basically I would have flown straight home from China, flew to Denver, gone to selections, and had to compete.
Okay.
Yeah, which I'm glad I didn't. Like, coming off a streak on the road like that, like to go back to selections. I think Casey won both days, and like Dylan was there. He got second both days, and like would have been a hard comp to go and perform and get those starts back. I was fortunate that like showing up in Ruka that year, the biggest blessing for me was that it snowed a ton the night before, and Olympic season, ton of hot shots on World Cup. Like, that course was a racetrack, dead straight that morning. And I went, I think I was like 52nd out of the gate. And I'm down bottom watching it with Riley. And we're just watching top dog after top dog blow out, blow up, or something. Like, this course got like really hard in that qualies.
Yeah.
And Riley just looked at me, gave me a strategy, and was like, you're going to go, 70% intensity, keep it tight, get down the course. Like, that's all you need to do. You'll get in the final. And okay, deal, done.
Yeah.
That was at a point where whatever he said, I trusted, I'd do, and did it. Ended up making the final. I was the only U.S. guy in the final, and so I left Ruka being like, okay, look, I'm safe for a few more events, you know?
Yep.
And then I went to China, and I could let the governor off a little and see what I had, and in the qualies and the finals there, I did, which was awesome. But that's an interesting one. That was the one event Riley didn't come to leading up to the games, was China.
Okay.
And that's probably my biggest moment in my career, that like that event right there is what got me into the Olympics. Like that event was that was my moment, right? Yeah. And I remember I did final one, and run of my career, run of my life. And I remember being down bottom, you do the whole, you stand in front of the camera, all the scores come in, everything. I watch, I think it was Jay Wu and Mick left. I qualified third, both their scores come in, I'm in first. Holy shit, right? But that was a moment where, like, looking back on it, like, gosh, I could have used a Riley in that moment. Like, didn't speak to any coaches, nothing, which is partly on me, right? Sure. As the athlete, I should have probably.
But you're young in that.
Yeah, I'm young.
You have your right.
Yeah, and I'm sitting in first at a World Cup, and I'm watching the GOAT Mick ski by me, like, after getting a strategy from his coaches and everything of how to essentially just like walk through and win this event, and I got nothing. And I remember being on the lift and wishing so bad I had cell service there so I could call Riley and just like tell me what to do, right? Like I wasn't developed enough in my career where like I knew what it took to win a World Cup, to even podium a World Cup, right? I made my first singles final the week before.
Right.
And next thing I know, I'm sitting in first. So really no game plan or strategy. And well, me being, you know, young, all that and stuff, what did I say? I did that run. I'm going to go even harder. Well, I skied right around bottom air because I went harder. And if I hit that bottom air, like, it was probably a season ender for me. And yeah, I ended up in sixth. And I look back on that moment a ton, especially being a coach now, is like how to help athletes avoid that moment.
Sure.
That's like a huge pivotal moment in my career where like, yeah, being retired and stuff now, like I'll stay up some nights thinking about that day.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure. Yeah. Those events stick out, right?
Oh yeah.
Those events stick out. Yeah.
And that's a big learning moment for me. It was both as an athlete and especially now as a coach of like how to help athletes through those moments. Because every athlete's going to get in that moment their first supers, whether it's at selections, a NORAM, a World Cup, the Olympics, anything. Like, how do you walk them through those moments and give them the guidance so that they know someone's there that believes in them and they feel like they have a good plan and they know how to attack it.
Yeah. No, I think that's crucial. I mean, it happens so often.
Oh,
like for me, 2012, Stratton, first year they did the super final, they only did 5.
Yeah.
And I remember being in and I remember being up top, like, now I'm going.
Yeah.
I went before, but now I'm like going even more.
Yeah.
And I like specifically remember Marchetti being like, stick to the game plan.
Yeah.
Let's go top to bottom, like nothing crazy. I'm like, nah.
Yep.
Nah, I'm going to crank this shit up to 11.
Yeah. Well, right, that's where.
And so it's like those, you know, which you get the wisdom to be able to make those changes, you know, and to be able to see it with the athlete lens and with that coach lens, right? There's so many times where on the other side now, and being able to see like those changes, like, you know, Cole McDonald's classic example in Idre, executing like the game plan of being able to point A to point B, like they're like your shit.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Don't
like, not
do more.
Right.
Yeah.
No need to do more. And like, you know, there's plenty of examples with Tall or Charlie or, you know, those people up top and being able to have that kind of wisdom to be able to give them, you know. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting and also looking at like China, you know, you don't have Riley to be able to like lean on, but you know, you would hope or think, and like maybe that's the different dynamic that you have with those coaches, and maybe, you know, you're on a heater, maybe they don't want to talk to you, you don't want to talk to them. It's kind of one of those hard moments to be able to navigate rather than and like know like, hey, you know, like, dude, skiing great, let's just have fun, like make another run, no need to go crazy, like to be able to figure out that strategy, right?
And that's one, looking at me too as an athlete in that point in my career, like I do wish I had a little bit more of the maturity or foresight to be like, I gotta go talk to them. Somebody's got to tell me what to do right now, because if I go do what I think is right, it's not.
Right.
You know, so that's where like part of that, you look at athlete development and all of that and stuff, like that's a part where looking back on, I wish I had a little bit more like in me that was like, I'm going to seek them out, you know?
But that's a hard line to walk. I mean, you know, you're a young athlete, like you don't, you know, I mean, that's a hard line to walk, and the wisdom and that you gain from that experience. But, like, you know, it's always one of those, and at least my opinion on it, especially like as a coach now and everything else, is like, I'd rather give out the information than not give it out. And then like, you know, be like having nightmares for the rest of it. Like, I should have said something. I didn't say something, like, you know, I'd rather give them the information and then like, hey, whether, you know, you had a great relationship with them at the time, or it's Caleb or Matt or whoever's, you know, like that. And it's easy being the Monday morning quarterback, right? But at least like my perspective in knowing now is like, I'd rather let you know, like, all right, this was the score for whatever else up top, unless like with that athlete they specifically say like, I don't want to know what's going on with anybody else. Tell me nothing. Just give me the then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. This is how we can work or where we can go from there, you know?
Yep. No, I remember too, like going up for that super finals, right? Like I'd been at super finals at selections and NORAMs. It's all guys, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I rode up that chair behind Mick, and it's a little double chair.
Yep.
Oh, this guy on that lift, right? I'm riding up it, and it's like a beast was awoken in him. Like, I'm just watching him behind him, and all that's going through my mind is like, how am I going to beat that guy? And you go up top and you see him with Coburn and stuff, and like, right, it's like all these coaches that like, they don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
They're all looking at me like,
Who's
this
guy?
guy's leading?
Yeah.
Right? And like, you know, probably a bad idea at the time. They have the TV up top where you can watch the runs. Like I watch Mick's run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the gate in 20 seconds. I'm watching that guy's run.
Yeah.
He lays down a heater and I'm like, holy shit.
Right.
I'm going to go hard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, anyone that knows me, the second I push out of the gate was like, he's not making it down. He's not making it down. I had no business doing a full that big.
Yeah.
Like, no business. But, you know, you live and learn.
Yeah.
So it is interesting how, like, that moment was, like, a pretty pivotal point in my career in the fact that, like, that elevated me to the Olympics and, like, that helped me achieve a lifelong goal and, like, everything like that. But then it's also a huge learning moment as a coach of, like, how to navigate those waters. Like you said, like, you have the information, make sure you give it, you know, like,
right.
Like whether they want to listen or not, or how they choose to use the information you give or anything, like it certainly has helped shape a lot of my coaching philosophies
Sure,
and
yeah,
such,
yeah.
which is huge, right?
No,
So
absolutely.
it's an aspect of like I had to learn that lesson the hard way as an athlete, but I think it's helped me quite a bit as a coach.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs, you know?
No, yeah, 100%. So the rest of that season, because that's your first full tour, right? You skied that full tour.
One and only.
One and only. Now,
One
the
and
year
only.
before, you had gotten your first final at Deer Valley, right?
Made
Duels,
finals and duels.
like 10th or 11th there
Yep.
at DV under the lights, which
Yep.
would be pretty sweet.
Oh, dream come true, right? DV's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the one thing you hope as an up and coming athlete. Like everyone you coach or everyone you see that has goals and aspirations in skiing is like, you hope they get to ski DV under the lights.
Right.
That is the Super Bowl. That is the pinnacle of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's, especially being an American, like
Yeah.
you can hear the rumble. You can feel it in the gate.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
That's the one that you want.
Yeah.
And so the rest, I mean, what was that Olympic experience like? I mean, you qualify there, so then you kind of have an idea, right? You still have to finish out after China, where you have Deer Valley is always the last qualifier, right?
DV, no, Mont Tremblant was the last one that year.
Tremblant was
So
the last
we
one.
went
Okay, that year.
Calgary,
Mhm.
DV, Tremblant. Went to Calgary, didn't make a final. Went to DV, thought I skied pretty well. Made the final both days.
Mhm.
Okay results, whatever. Like somewhere in that 8 to 16 range.
Do you think that the result from China like got into your head a little bit, that like you had great opportunity and then kind of so was it a little bit in the back of your mind, kind of the rest of
No, I certainly knew at that point like what I was capable of.
Yeah.
And then just wasn't, at that point, like I started the season off of like I assumed you needed 2 World Cup podiums to make the games.
Mhm.
So that was my goal.
Yep.
How to obtain that in my head, really no idea. But then China gave me a taste of it. But I got 6th.
Mhm.
So I'm sitting there at this point still like, I'm not going to qualify for the Olympics.
Mhm.
Not going. And so I'm at these next events stressed out. I've got like people talking Olympics, all this stuff, what you got to do. At that time, I'm dating Morgan Shield. She gets her 2nd podium. She's named to the Olympic team. It's all this stuff. And I'm sitting there like, I don't know how the F I'm going to qualify for this. Like, go through DV, go to Tremblant. I'm just like a stress ball. Just like so stressed. But then we get to Tremblant. It's the last day, one day, and I'm like, well, I don't have a podium under my belt. So, like, Olympic hopes, out, done. We go to Tremblant. I think I went 27th. Thought I laid down a good run, straight into 27th. And then I start watching this event, and it's just heater after heater. And I'm like, Jesus. Maybe I think I did probably go straight into 27th. Like, that checks out. I remember going back to the room, and I'm sitting there like, damn, well, I gave him my all, good run and stuff. And Casey and Dringa and I are in there kind of like, we're sad. We're bummed. We're
Sure.
like, damn.
Yeah.
Olympic dream's done. Like, hey, buddy, cheers. Good job. We gave it a good run. We tried. I remember Troy Tully walks in, and he's like, what are you two so upset about? And we're like, dude, we came close. Like, we had moments to strike and just didn't do it. And he's like, you're both going to get named to the team. Like, do the math.
Yeah.
And he, like, busts out this sheet that he has that tracks it all. And he's like, what do you two mean?
Right.
And that was also, like, a big moment in my career where I was like, I should be tracking this shit.
Right.
Like, I should know this
tracking
stuff.
the drops, tracking
I should know the real criteria. I should know the real rules. I should know how it all breaks down, because I sat there stressing for 3 weeks, just eating myself alive, losing sleep and stuff. And then this other guy walks in, and he's like, literally no need to stress. Like, you're fine. You're going to go to the Olympics. And I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
Like, that was like a huge revelation for me. Was like, holy crap, I can track this stuff and like know it. And from that moment on, like after the Olympics, I started tracking everything.
Yeah.
Spreadsheets of everything. And like that also translated into coaching. Like,
sure. Yeah.
So easy to track everything. All the info's there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I was a young athlete that I just didn't do it. And,
And in fairness, like that really isn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you can track it if you want, but that's not really your
No.
job, right? It's the job of the coaches to be able to kind of track some of that stuff and keep track of how everything's progressing throughout the season, where you're at. I mean, that's really not supposed to be your role as an athlete, right?
No.
But it does give good
it gives
insight
some insight into coaching. Is like right now I track everything.
Yeah.
And I only give that information if that information is wanted.
Right.
Mostly it's for me. It helps me make a lot more educated judgment calls and decisions, and helps me keep track of like, right, coaching a big team, where athletes are going to be, right, where staff needs to be, how to help them prepare for everything better. And but that clicked for me in that moment as an athlete of like, I want to be aware of everything I can be aware of.
Yep.
I want to know the realistic chances and odds of everything that can happening.
Right.
And that gave me peace of mind, right?
Yeah.
So that translates into now my coaching of like, the more information I have, the more helpful I can be to athletes.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean I'm going to tell an athlete like, hey, you're sitting in second to go to Junior Worlds, but it might help me make an educated judgment call on how to help them propel to that level they want to be at.
Right. No, absolutely.
Which is huge, right? Like, it's crazy looking back on it, how big of a moment that was for me, where I'm like, you can track that?
What?
Yeah. And it, huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
So what was that? I mean, finally you get named. I mean, not only from the conversation with Tully, but that ends up being true. And then what's that journey like to talk about some of the stress beforehand, and then you go through that, and is it more stress, less stress? Are you enjoying the ride of it?
It's crazy. That was honestly, the Olympics was probably the least stressful event of my World Cup career.
Yeah.
Right at that point, I had made it. I had done it. At that point, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I could go out and just ski, take in every moment of it, and like at that point, whatever happened.
Yeah.
Like there was so much you can't control there that like I didn't have any of that added pressure.
Right.
I was a long shot to go.
Yep.
And I did it, and I just wanted to go and try and ski my best and like have fun with it, experience it all, right? Like,
Yeah.
and take it all in and just put down my best runs possible.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever happened in my eyes. Like, I think I ended up 23rd,
Mm-hmm.
which is right. A lot of people are like, "Hey, you made it! Congrats, great job!" Right? Like, I look back on it and like 23rd is like, that's a failure.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not a good result realistically or anything, and nobody wants to go there and miss the final. I did.
Yeah.
That's okay, right?
Right.
But yeah, looking back on the whole experience, it's like, it's wild just how much extra stuff goes on there outside of the actual skiing. Is like, it's a bizarre experience for, I think, any athlete to have for the first time or the only time or anything.
Yeah.
But like, I was young, I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
I turned 21 the day I competed there.
Yeah.
Which is like bizarre, right? Like, especially being an American, 21, drinking age, everything. Like,
Yep.
talk about my best birthday, you know?
Yeah.
So I look at that too as like, that whole experience and everything was just like something I could never change or never really would want to change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong, I think a lot about like how I would have loved to ski in that final and everything, but also huge moment that help who I am, right? Like,
Sure.
like, yeah, I look at that event as like, that was a failure of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can take the pros out of it. If I went, I did it, but it also helped shape of like, how do you help prepare athletes for those moments that everyone thinks is a massive success,
Right.
but you as an athlete look at as a failure?
Yeah.
Right? Like, those are huge moments, and a lot of people will look at that and be like, it's a crazy way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But athletes are going to go through that their whole career. Like, any sport you look at, like, I don't know of an athlete that'll look back and like be 100% saying my career was a success, right? Like, even the greatest of all time, Kingsbury, like, more wins, more everything, like, can only imagine he wishes he had 3 golds.
Right.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and he's the best to ever do it. Like, there's so many, in our eyes, success stories that the individual probably looks at as a failure.
Yeah.
Which is a wild one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the hard thing about life is that the failures are usually the things you learn the most from.
For sure.
You learn a lot from the disappointment, because it really makes you go back and be like,
yeah,
what did I fuck up here? Because I clearly missed something, or I clearly had the wrong strategy, or things did not work out the way that they were supposed to. So after you go through, you have your Olympic experience, are you planning on continuing? Is that like, all right, that's just a taste, I'm going to be back in 4 years?
Yeah.
And after that, I mean, I guess we'll get into some of the poor aspects of the injuries and everything else that can kind of derail things. Talk about getting some wisdom there for coaching.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, let's talk a little bit about the
no, I
more
planned
failures, I guess.
Yeah,
Or just
yeah,
like
yeah.
your body failing you down a little bit, right?
Gosh. And talk about a wild one, right? Like, yeah, I planned on competing through 2026. You know, I wanted to be 3-time Olympian, like the whole kit and caboodle, do the whole thing, and finish that Olympic year off. And that's where, you know, a lot of the, you know, thank my parents a ton. Like, they supported me through that Olympics financially. Like, but after that, I remember having a pretty real talk with them, being like, hey, you're an adult, you're 21, like, I think we've done a lot for you. Like, you have to take on a lot of those financial burdens now. And obviously I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, for sure. So I go, and like, I thought there was a chance I might get named to the A team that spring.
Okay.
No chance. I finished second in the U.S. on the tour to Brad, and I was like, you know, I missed A team by a couple, criteria by a couple spots. So I left the door open there. Got named B team, ended up having to fund my whole season and stuff. So I'm working at Whole Foods, you know, which is like tough to get up for a 7 a.m. warm up at the ramps when you closed down Whole Foods at 11:30 the night before,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
But did it, actually had one of my best prep periods, went to Zermatt that year, finally had more DD, like felt really good. I was like, this is my, like, I'm going to come alive. Like, I have the experience now. I'm not a rookie. Like, I'm gonna make something now.
And there's a lot of those things that you can only get from the experience,
Yeah,
right? Your first full tour, it's not like a one-off at DD, American spot. Like, you get to get a little bit of the ins and outs of what a full tour is. You go to the Olympian. Like, there's a lot of experience there that, like, all right, have all this extra data now. Great prep period.
I know I'm going to show up to Ruka with a top 10 bib on. Like, you know, I'm there. Like, it's time to strike. And, go to Switzerland, having a great camp, like, training hard and training pretty good on, like, brutal course. And just never had shin pain, you know?
Yeah.
And talking to the PT, and I'm like, man, I got crazy shin pain on my left leg. Just crazy. And then one day, I do a run, take a bottom air big, and land, and just, like, no weight on my leg can happen. I end up going down bottom, and the coaches are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And I ski off. I go up the T-bar, ride the whole thing on one foot. All of a sudden, I can't feel my left foot, like, weird stuff. I'm talking to the PT, and I'm like, yeah, have to imagine I broke my leg. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Go down, x-rays, everything, not broken, good, but, like, man, still can't walk on this leg. So, bizarre injury, I get basically a bad bone bruise, you know? And bad bone bruise, man, lasted a while.
Yeah.
Took years, and every time I'd try coming back, I just re-hurt it. And it was probably something I could have skied through. Like, you know, I skied a lot of days through, like, a lot of pain. It was just like, man, you know, and the end of it, you look back to, and you're like, what a pussy, like a bruise, a bruise, right? But, like, it started getting to the point where, like, I lived with Rowley and Joel and Morgan and stuff, and around the house, like, my foot would just go to sleep. So it became kind of a classic joke. Like, I'd be walking around, and all of a sudden you'd hear, like, we had, you know, half flights of stairs, like 4 feet, and you'd hear one of them, like, hey, buddy, you okay? It'd be like me falling down the stairs. Like, my foot just would stop working.
That's crazy.
So it took, like, a couple years of just, like, battling that, and finally, like, made my comeback. Went to World Cup. I go to DV, which is hilarious. Like, the last duel on World Cup I skied was at World Cup Finals, Olympic year. Ended up dueling Walter, beat him. Dueled Mick, lost. Go to Deer Valley. Walter's top 3 in the world, and this guy damn near half-coursed me. Just slaughtered me. I'm sitting at DV like, man, I think I've probably lost a step. I think that was something. All right, well, I'm gonna keep giving it a shot. Like, I gotta come back, go yada yada yada. Go to Japan, lose to some 15-year-old. Some 15-year-old Finnish kid works me. Like, wow, this is tough. Like, you know, thought I trained my ass off, gave it my best shot and stuff, and then go to Kazakhstan. COVID's breaking out. It's getting wild. And Kazakhstan's got a crazy flat landing on bottom air. Boom, land at one of the training days, come down, look at the staff, and I'm like, nah, my leg's done. Like, I did it. I did it again. Like, shit. All right, well, I'm going to keep skiing. Yada, yada, yada. Go through the comp, like,
it's not going to go.
Not going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you don't have any feeling in it. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, and, like, I can't flex a boot. Like, I switched boots. I tried different boots with different like pain points and stuff, and just wasn't happening. And basically at that point, I knew I was done. That was it. Met the coaches after and was like, guys, that's a wrap. Done. I fought this for a couple years. Like, I'm over it.
And what was that? I mean, was it for how big was the frustration, I guess, going through and like, I mean, you it's interesting, right? You're like, you feel like you're right there. You have the best season you ever had. A little bit of setback from injury, but then that just almost snowballs the other way, right? And then you're finally able to get back. You show up like, all right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that last season that I did come back, like, my heart wasn't fully in it. That fall,
Interesting.
I was at a camp in Chile, and I remember I hurt my shin again there. And I'm just like, God damn, this is like the third time it's happened. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was planning on going to Ruka that year. Like, I was on a good path, and I was like, okay, like, now I'm sitting here leaving Chile again on crutches. And I left Chile, and actually Riley was a national team coach at that point. And before I got in the taxi, I was like, I'm done, dude. Like, adios,
Yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a career for me. And remember, I get home, and a few days later, he calls me, and he's like, dude, like, don't give up. Like, let's go through the proper rehab. Let's give it a shot. My parents call me, all of it. I get talked back into skiing.
Yeah.
And I was kind of already out in my
Okay.
head. But then I was like, all right, I'll give it one more real shot.
Okay.
So by the time I really came point in Kazakhstan where my leg's killing again and like I'm not at the level I was ready.
Yeah.
Like I was done.
Yeah.
So I was pretty at peace with it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I leave Kazakhstan, get home, fly through Russia, crazy travel day, masks, world shutting down. I drive to California to go on a surf trip. And I'm like talking to my brother, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I send in my official retirement email, and I was like, I'm going to go to Nationals. It's in Squaw Valley. I'll have a hell of a going away party, like one last hurrah.
Yep.
And I see the U.S. ski team like group chat going off of like, we have 20 hours to get back in the U.S.
Right.
Like, everyone pack your shit. We're going home.
Right. From Idre.
Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting on the beach like, holy shit, what a time to retire. And yeah, I was totally at peace with it. Really didn't think much about coaching. I was going to go to school, everything. And then Troy Murphy was coaching Park City at the time. And I knew he was done. And I was like, it's actually a pretty good job to have. Like, while I go to school, I can make it work. So
Yeah.
got in touch with them, got kind of a part-time job coaching. And then next thing I know, I fell in love with it. And
Yeah.
decided kind of after that next season, I coached, worked with a lot of young athletes stuff, and was like, damn, I think I like this coaching aspect more than I did the competing.
Yeah.
And then dove headfirst into coaching.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what has that transition now as you come in, and obviously the success that you've had as a coach?
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be pretty fun to go through and see all those different results. I mean, national champion, junior world champion, I've had World Cup athletes, top 5. Like it's pretty, got to be pretty rewarding to see all those results. And I mean, what has that kind of learning experience been for you? And you're still young. And
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
Right? Like the transition from athlete to coach is one of the more bizarre feelings that like I think is great for almost any athlete to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You go from being the most selfish human to
it's true.
having to be the
and you
most...
have to be, right?
Yeah, you have to be. You want to succeed, you look out for yourself.
Right.
You put yourself above everything else. You got to.
Yeah.
And that's the hard truth of it. To a coach, all of a sudden, you have to be the most selfless human.
Mm-hmm.
You got to put everyone before you. And that's the way it is. And it's what a bizarre experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To all of a sudden you have to be so selfless and so involved in everything's about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that transition is so awesome.
Yeah.
Like I look back on a lot of it and like the person I was when I competed and just everything is like, yeah, it's what I had to do to succeed and stuff. But like looking back on it, like I don't know if I liked that person, right? Where like you look from the outside back and you're like, damn, what a wild thing.
Yeah.
Where being a coach now is like, right, my success relies on how helpful I can be to help others succeed,
mm-hmm.
which is like wild. Like I only succeed if the ones I help succeed.
Right.
And that success is so different, right? It's not my goals, not my ambitions anymore. It's not what I value as success, right? That success could be some kid making a final at junior nationals.
Right.
That could be some kid doing his first twister spread. That could be a kid making it to World Cup. And it's so different in the levels of how they value success and goals and ambition that like you really get to deal with it all.
Yeah.
It's not it's no longer like so singular in one path. You have so many different paths and avenues, and like you can celebrate multiple successes in one day.
Yeah.
You can go to U.S. selections and have, a Kylie Cariotis get a jacket, and you can have a young kid do their first T to B ever in a FIS event.
Right.
And like some coaches might value it differently, but like I value those as huge successes. Both of those are massive wins. That's the incredible part of it, is the amount of different successes you get to experience and the amount of different failures. Right. And like you get to be a shoulder to lean on for a lot of failures, and hopefully you give the right guidance and advice that they learn from it and they become better from it.
Yeah.
And those failures don't haunt them, so to speak.
Yeah. No,
You know?
absolutely. Yeah. No, it's tough. I mean, you never get to have a perfect day, right? It's always like somebody might have success, but when you have that roster and different levels you're dealing with, and you seem to really like that a lot more than some of the higher level, because you had a little taste with the ski team for a little bit, and it seems like the growth of being able to help them get up to that next level is something that you really enjoy, as you just touched on, with the different aspects of like, all right, I made my first top 30, or I made selection. It's like,
no, it's funny, like looking at it, right? Obviously coming through the Vail system and everything, like Dowling is probably one of the bigger mentors in my ski career and life and everything. And like, it's funny listening to his podcast with you, right? Like Dowling did a short stint with a national team, ended up leaving, found out he liked developing athletes and stuff. And like a lot of my beliefs and values and coaching philosophies in skiing have come from him, where it's like, right, like part of it I think shaped that is why I like developing younger athletes, because of the influence he played on my career in that time frame, and how much of an asset and how valuable he was. That like, I went to the national team, ended up, a month stint, did the camp and stuff, and halfway through the camp I knew, I was like, this isn't fun for me, right? Like I was like, this is like, it's not the level of coaching I wanted to do, and it's not the structure I really liked. Like you see a lot less big leaps with national teamers, which is totally understandable, right? Like they are there to make very small changes daily, and they're there to pattern great habits. Where in the developmental stage, you get to put a little flair on it, a little pizzazz on their development and stuff. And like you see some massive leaps, then you see massive steps back, and like the day-to-day work with it is a lot more fun. It's a lot more what would the word be? It's a lot more variable. Like every day is a new experience in the developmental stages, which is, that's the enjoyable part for me.
No, it's awesome, right? You get to see, and there is those differences, right? You get to see some kid at the ramps doing their first double, or you have like some kids that are just making those little improvements and kind of tinkering, so you really get the whole like full gamut of what's going on with the progress. Now, one of the questions that I was just curious about, as we've been talking and everything, is where for you is some of that competitiveness from? Because like we competed and everything else, you've always been like super competitive on the hill, and I'm just curious, like on and off the hill, just in life, like where does some of that come from? Is that mom, dad? You touched on a little bit with your brother and some of that, like that's just, sibling rivalry is certainly one of those things that you have for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I definitely come from a very competitive family. Like dad super competitive, brother, sister, mom super competitive, everyone. And I think it probably did start with my older brother when we were young. And I think I say that's why it was good we went different avenues, because of how competitive we were. That I think our relationship and everything, had we kept competing against each other, would have turned pretty volatile. but yeah, from a young age, right? Like I was always the younger brother. I always played up in the age group in team sports on my brother's team, always chasing after him, his coattails, like wanted to be as good as him at everything. And then once we went different avenues, that just stuck with, right?
Yeah.
Whoever the competitor was, right? Like, I don't know. I got a great piece of advice when I was young of like, when it's, what do you want to do today? You know, some people say, well, I want to beat Mick. And some people say, I want to win.
Yeah.
I was taught that, you know, the losers say they want to beat Mick.
Right.
The winners say they want to win.
Right.
Because, right, you could beat Mick, but Mick could DNF.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you win.
Right.
And that was like a huge moment of like competitiveness of trying to like, yes, you see all your competition, but you don't want to beat them. You want to win.
Right.
And like whatever it takes that day to win is what you got to do.
What you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So that was, competitiveness with the brother probably. And then like in the Vail system, like, I don't know, a lot of us would joke a lot that like a Dowling was he was the stepfather that everyone wanted his approval. You were competing for his approval, right?
Yeah, right.
So that competitiveness then branched out there, and and that was those are some of the pieces of it.
Yeah. And that, well, how is it now? So what's the drive for you now? I mean, I guess prior and now, like in your career and everything, because now you're essentially on the same level with that, right? You're competing against Vail, you're competing against the U.S., right? I mean, you got best program in the country, in my opinion, with Wasatch and running that now, and what just total domination.
Yeah, it's interesting as a coach, like, oh gosh, I think a little bit of my competitiveness has gone away.
Yeah.
In that regard of like what I value as success and such has changed so much from like winning to what all of the athletes I coach value is as success is that's a big piece. Is like I look at it a lot less about like competing to, you know, have good stats or competing to win. Like, don't get me wrong, I want Wasatch to win out.
Yeah.
But that's not my top priority anymore.
Right.
It's more how do I help these athletes achieve whatever it is, and how do I set them up better in life? Whether that's skiing, whether that's people, like how do I have them leave mogul skiing and be like, I'm proud of myself, you know, like how do I help them handle it all when it all comes crumbling down? Because it will at some point, every athlete, and like how do I have an impact on their career? How do I be that Riley? You know, like that guy had such a lasting impact on my life. As I said earlier, like married my wife and I, like a guy I still call and talk to, and like a guy I know is always there for me. Like, how do I be that influence in all these athletes' lives where they can know that like whatever it is they do in life, they have someone in their corner.
Yeah.
You know? And that's a big piece of like, yeah, I like to think a lot of the competitiveness has left me. And I think that's like, it's shifting my values in a coaching role.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great spot to leave it, dude.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and getting to learn a little bit about your career. And it's been awesome, dude. Thanks for doing this.
Bob, thanks for having me, man. What a hoot.
Yeah. It's a good time.
Love chatting, skiing. Got the dog behaving.
Yeah. No, it's
good.
Perfect. All right. Thanks
Bob.
Yep. Bye, everybody.